A week had passed since Liam's miraculous recovery, and Nakia knew it was time. The Duafora mansion, once a place of promise, had become a symbol of pain and danger. Kwame's mother, with her dark schemes and twisted intentions, had nearly cost her both of her children. Nakia couldn't allow that threat to linger. One night, under the cover of darkness, she quietly gathered Anaya and Liam, packing their belongings in haste. She left a long letter on the table addressed to Kwame and Kojo, explaining her need for distance. With her heart heavy, she made her escape. Nakia fled far from the Duafora mansion, traveling for days until she reached a remote village nestled deep in the mountains, isolated from the chaos that had once surrounded her. She settled in Kuntu village, a place where magic and whispers of curses held no power, and where she could raise her children in peace. For the next 10 years, she built a life there, running a small tailoring business and raising her twins away from the looming shadows of their past. But the distance didn't erase the pain entirely. In the quiet moments, she'd think of Kwame and Kojo, how she had torn the children away from them. Meanwhile, back at the Duafora mansion, Kojo and Kwame were drowning in anguish. The first few months after Nakia's departure were agonizing. Kwame hired private investigators, sparing no expense in the search for Nakia and their son. Despite relentless efforts, every lead turned out to be a dead end, leaving him frustrated and heartbroken. The years passed, and after 6 years, he married Zara, a kind-hearted woman with whom he has a daughter, Amira. Kwame, devastated, had turned his grief into anger. For 6 years, he couldn't let go of the resentment he felt towards Nakia for taking their son without a word. Kojo, on the other hand, was still madly in love with Nakia. Though he had tried to move forward with other relationships, his love and the memories of her were so strong that he couldn't move on. For years, he clung to the hope that one day Nakia would return, as the thought of her was etched deeply in his heart. Nakia, during her years away, remained connected to the fathers of her children through letters. Sent by anonymous couriers, she'd send pictures and updates on the twins' lives, what they were learning, how they were growing. This small gesture kept both Kojo and Kwame tethered to their children, but it was never enough. They wanted to see their children, to hold them, and to be a part of their lives. And the years they had lost felt like a dagger that twisted in their hearts. Kwame's rage grew deeper with each passing year, but he found no outlet for it. He blamed his mother for everything: the black magic, the lies, the curses that had fractured his family. His relationship with her became cold and distant. Then, news came that she was gravely ill. She needed a kidney transplant, and after years on the waiting list, hope was dwindling. Despite his bitterness, when Kwame's mom reached out in desperation, begging for forgiveness and his help, he couldn't completely turn his back on her. She was still his mother. Family members were tested as potential donors, but none were a match. Word of Kwame's mother's illness eventually made its way to Nakia, carried by a trusted messenger who still had connections within the Duafora household. Nakia's heart wrestled with the news. She despised Kwame's mother for what she had done to her children, for the suffering and danger she had caused. But her faith wouldn't allow her to revel in someone else's pain. For days, she wrestled with the decision, debating whether it was time to return to the mansion. Finally, Nakia called Anaya and Liam to her. She explained the full truth, the reason they had fled, the curse that had nearly claimed their lives, and the dark magic their grandmother had invoked. The twins, now mature teenagers, listened intently but offered no response. They had grown up knowing their mother's decision had been for their safety, but now the reality of it sunk deeper. They understood the sacrifice she had made, but they still felt the loss of not having their fathers around for 10 years. Their hearts were hardened toward their grandmother. Weeks passed, and Kwame's mother's condition worsened. Nakia knew the time had come. She gathered her children and made the long journey back to the Duafora mansion. When she arrived at the gates with Anaya and Liam by her side, the guards were stunned. The news of her return spread like wildfire through the household. Kwame, who had been in his study, rushed out at the sound of the commotion. When he saw Nakia standing there, his heart leapt. Without a word, he ran to the children, embracing them tightly, tears filling his eyes. Kojo, too, was summoned. When he arrived and saw Nakia with the twins, his heart swelled with joy. He embraced them all, overwhelmed by their return. That night, they shared a quiet dinner. The twins met their little sister, Amira, and were polite but distant. Zara, Kwame's wife, watched the scene unfold with a coldness she tried to hide. As the evening wore on, Kwame offered Nakia the guest room for the night. But before she could respond, Zara interjected, her voice sharp with jealousy.
They'll be staying with her parents, isn't that right, Nakia?
Nakia, sensing the tension, nodded.
Yes, we won't be staying.
Over the next few weeks, Zara's jealousy grew. She became paranoid that Kwame's old feelings for Nakia might resurface, and she concocted schemes to make Nakia's return as difficult as possible. She whispered lies to Kwame, accusing Nakia of things she hadn't done, planting seeds of doubt. But Kwame knew Nakia's character too well to fall for Zara's ploys. He saw through her jealousy and reassured her that his commitment was to their family now. Despite Kwame's words, one evening at the Duafora mansion, Nakia was seated in the garden, enjoying some fresh air. Zara, with jealousy burning in her chest, had been watching from the window. The sight of Nakia being so calm, composed, and so easily loved by her husband and even Kojo enraged her. She had been trying to undermine Nakia's presence ever since she returned, planting false stories and spreading rumors in the household. But today, she was going to confront Nakia directly. Zara stormed out into the garden, her face twisted in anger.
What are you doing here, Nakia? Flaunting yourself like you belong in this house. You left. You abandoned everyone, and now you just waltz back in like nothing happened. You think you can take Kwame away from me? Over my dead body?
Nakia, caught off guard by the venom in Zara's voice, slowly rose to her feet. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with intensity.
Zara, I don't know what your problem is, but I didn't come back here for Kwame or Kojo. I came back for my children, and to give them the chance to be with their fathers. But you're not about to come at me like that. I don't play those games.
Zara stepped closer, her voice dripping with disdain.
Oh, I know your game. Acting all holy like you're some saint. But you're just waiting for the right moment to tear this family apart. I see right through you.
Nakia's patience snapped. She squared her shoulders and stepped right into Zara's face, her tone dropping low.
Let me tell you something real clear, Zara. I'm a holy woman, but I can go hood real quick if I have to. Don't think for 1 second that I won't whoop your ass if you keep pushing me. You keep trying to start something and I'll finish it.
Zara's eyes widened, shocked at Nakia's fierceness. But before things could escalate further, both Kojo and Kwame came rushing out, having heard the commotion from inside.
Whoa, what's going on here?
Kojo stepped between them, holding his hands up to stop Nakia from advancing. Kwame quickly moved to Zara's side, trying to calm her down.
Zara, what's happening?
Nakia, still fuming but holding herself back, pointed at Zara.
Your wife here came at me, accusing me of all kinds of things. I've kept my distance, I've stayed in my lane, but she won't stop with her jealousy and childish games. I'm not about to let her keep disrespecting me. If she does, I will have to show her these hands.
Kwame's face darkened as he turned to Zara.
Zara, this has to stop. I've told you before. I'm committed to you, to our family. Nakia didn't come here to ruin anything. She's here for the children. You're my wife, and I love you. But this behavior, it's childish, and it needs to end. Now.
Zara looked between Nakia and Kwame, embarrassed and frustrated.
But...
No.
Kwame cut her off, his voice firm.
No more excuses. You need to stop this.
Kojo, still standing close to Nakia, added,
We're all here for the kids. Whatever issues you have, put them aside. Nakia isn't your enemy.
Zara, humiliated and realizing she had gone too far, stormed off without another word, leaving the others in tense silence. Kwame turned back to Nakia, sighing.
I'm sorry for her behavior. I'll handle it.
Nakia, still simmering but calmer now, nodded.
I'm not here to cause problems, but I'm not about to let her keep testing me. I'll stay respectful as long as she does.
Kwame nodded in agreement, and Kojo stood by, silently offering his support to Nakia. The tension in the air slowly faded, but the message was clear. Nakia wasn't going to tolerate Zara's games anymore. Kojo, on the other hand, was hopeful. He had never stopped loving Nakia, and now that she had returned, he saw a chance to rebuild what they had once lost. But Nakia remained distant. She wasn't ready to reignite any old flames. Her focus was on her children and navigating the complicated dynamics of her return. As the days passed, Nakia decided to visit Kwame's mother. Though the twins refused to go, she knew it was the right thing to do. She found the old woman weak and frail, a shadow of her former self. Despite everything, Nakia prayed for her healing, placing her faith in God's hands. The encounter, though bitter, was a moment of closure. The evening breeze was gentle as Nakia stepped through the wooden doorway of her parents' house. The air inside smelled of herbs and warmth, the familiar comfort she had longed for after spending the day at the hospital. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of the visit. Liam and Anaya, now tall and poised in their teenage years, sat waiting for her in the small living room. Their faces held quiet curiosity, though they tried to mask their concern.
How was it, Ma?
Liam asked, breaking the silence. His tone was soft, but edged with tension. Nakia hung her coat on the back of a chair and lowered herself onto a cushion, rubbing her hands together as if the warmth from the house could ease the unease she carried.
She's not good.
Nakia began quietly, her voice low.
She's so frail. Honestly, I'm not sure how much longer she has.
Anaya leaned against the old wooden table, crossing her arms tightly. Her expression was impassive. Liam sat next to her, staring at the floor, processing the words. The woman who, despite being their grandmother, had once put their lives in danger with her reckless pursuit of dark magic. The wound of those memories still lingered, and now the news of her declining health weighed on them differently.
I know she's not someone you have many feelings for,
Nakia said, trying to choose her words carefully.
but she's still your grandmother, whatever she's done. She's human, and she's dying.
Liam glanced up briefly, his brows knitted. He didn't say anything, but the weight of it was sinking in. Anaya shifted on her feet, biting the inside of her cheek, but didn't speak.
There's going to be a testing drive this weekend. The doctors are trying to see if there is any match for a kidney donation. Without it, she won't make it.
Another heavy silence filled the room. The soft flicker of the lantern on the table cast shadows on the walls, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Nakia studied her children's faces. Both held their emotions tightly, but she could see the hints of conflict. They had every reason to hate their grandmother, yet here they were, faced with her impending mortality. Nakia said gently, her voice soothing.
Sometimes showing compassion isn't about who deserves it. It's about doing what's right.
Anaya's lips tightened, her gaze finally lifting to meet her mother's. Though no words passed, there was an acknowledgement, a flicker of pity. Liam, still quiet, nodded slightly, his emotions less guarded than Anaya's. Liam exhaled slowly, finally speaking.
We'll see what happens.
Anaya remained quiet, but shifted closer to her brother, her stance softening as her guard lowered. Nakia gave them both a small, tired smile. She knew this was hard for them, but she also knew that they had been raised to understand grace, no matter the circumstances.
Yes,
She said softly.
we'll see.
The three of them sat in the quiet house, the peaceful village sounds drifting in from the outside. As soon as Nakia entered her bedroom to sleep, Liam and Anaya sat together in the dimly lit living room. The silence between them was thick, a reflection of the unspoken emotions swirling in the air. After a few moments, Liam leaned back on the couch and let out a deep sigh.
She's really sick.
he muttered, referring to their grandmother, his tone flat. Anaya glanced at him, her eyes devoid of any real concern.
So? She brought it on herself. If it wasn't for Mom's prayers, we wouldn't even be here.
Liam nodded, the bitterness of the memory surfacing.
She almost killed us. And now we're supposed to care if she lives or dies?
Anaya's lips curled into a frown.
Whether she survives or not, it's none of our business. After everything she put us through, why should we even consider helping her? She didn't care about us then. Why should we care now?
Liam crossed his arms, staring out the window into the quiet night.
Mom's the only one still showing compassion, but I just can't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not after all she's done.
Anaya nodded in agreement.
If it wasn't for Mom's strength and her faith, we wouldn't even be sitting here. The woman practically made our lives a living hell.
They sat in silence for a few more moments, their minds set. The idea of getting tested or even offering help felt absurd to them. Finally, Anaya spoke again, her voice calm and resolute.
She's not our responsibility. Whatever happens to her, happens. I couldn't care less.
Liam shook his head.
Yeah, we owe her nothing. Let her deal with her own fate.
With that, the twins made up their minds. They had no intention of going out of their way to help the woman who had nearly destroyed their family. Whether she lived or died was no longer their concern. They knew their mother had her faith, but they had none to spare for the grandmother who had once tried to tear them apart. During the weeks that they've been back, the twins spent more time with their fathers. It was strange at first, reuniting with Kojo and Kwame after so many years apart. But as time passed, they began to settle into a rhythm. What stood out to Liam and Anaya the most, though, was Kojo's constant presence, not just in their lives, but in their mother's life. Kojo had gone above and beyond for them. He took them on walks, told them stories about their childhood, and was always there, ready to listen or offer a hand. But it was more than that. They noticed how he looked at their mother when she wasn't watching. His eyes would follow her, filled with a longing that was hard to miss, and it wasn't one-sided. Liam and Anaya had long suspected that their mother still held feelings for Kojo, even though she had distanced herself from him. Late at night, when they had been living far away, they would sometimes catch Nakia quietly looking at an old photo of Kojo. They'd seen her wipe away tears more than once, her heart torn by the life she'd left behind. But now that they were back, they saw the same thing happening. She was holding back, keeping a distance from Kojo, and the twins knew why. She didn't want to drag them through the same web of chaos and hurt that had once surrounded their lives. Liam and Anaya sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset dip below the horizon. Kojo had just left after spending the day with them, and their mother had retreated to her room, looking a little more tired than usual. The twins sat in silence for a few moments, a quiet determination growing between them. They had watched their mother suffer in silence for too long, sacrificing her own happiness for their sake. It was time to let her know that she didn't need to hold back anymore. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the Duafora mansion, Nakia lounged by the pool with her twins, Liam and Anaya. The gentle sound of water rippling created a soothing backdrop as they sat on the edge, their feet splashing playfully in the cool water. The air was filled with an unspoken tension as the twins exchanged glances, each knowing that this moment was about more than just enjoying the sunset. Liam took a deep breath, his heart racing.
Mom,
He began, his voice steady yet gentle.
we need to talk about something.
Anaya leaned in closer, her eyes filled with concern.
Yeah, we've noticed how you've been around Kojo. You still have feelings for him, don't you?
Nakia looked up, caught off guard by their directness. She hesitated, her gaze shifting toward the fading light.
You two are old enough to understand that things are complicated.
Complicated?
Liam interrupted softly.
Mom, we can see the way you look at him, the way you smile when he's around. It's okay to love him. You don't have to hide your feelings because of us.
Anaya nodded in agreement.
We know how much you care about us, but you shouldn't suppress your love for someone just because you're worried about what we might feel. We want you to be happy.
Nakia's heart swelled with emotion as she listened to her children. The weight of their words struck her deeply.
I don't want to put you through any more heartache after everything we've been through.
Liam reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly.
We're not kids anymore, Mom. We understand love and loss. You deserve to be with someone who cares for you, someone like Kojo. He's good for you, and we can see that he truly cares.
Anaya leaned in, her voice soft but firm.
We don't want you to sacrifice your happiness for us. If you love him, you should let him in. We want you to have a life filled with joy.
Nakia felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by their compassion and maturity. She pulled both of them into a tight embrace, holding them close as her heart swelled with pride.
How did I get so lucky to have you two?
She whispered, her voice thick with emotion.
You've both grown into such amazing young adults. I love you so much.
Liam and Anaya hugged her tighter, feeling the warmth of their mother's love surrounding them. The setting sun cast a soft glow on the trio, creating a moment of intimacy that encapsulated their bond. In that embrace, Nakia realized that her children were not just her support. They were also her encouragement to embrace love and happiness once more. As the warm embrace between Nakia and her twins lingered in the air, the sound of laughter filled the poolside. Liam and Anaya finally pulled away, smiles brightening their faces just as Kojo strolled into view. He paused, hands in his pockets, a playful grin spreading across his face.
Hey, nobody invited me to the hugging party.
He quipped, raising an eyebrow. The twins burst into laughter, the moment lightening the atmosphere.
We were just about to go inside.
Liam replied, excitement shining in his eyes.
Then I guess I'll have to crash the party,
Kojo said with a wink, pulling both Liam and Anaya into a warm hug, eliciting more giggles from them. As the twins waved goodbye and headed into the mansion, Kojo settled beside Nakia at the pool's edge, the water glistening under the fading sunlight. A brief silence enveloped them, filled with an unspoken connection. After a moment, Kojo turned to Nakia, his expression sincere.
I know you've been keeping your distance. I get it. It's because of the kids, right? But...
Before he could finish, Nakia gently took hold of his face, her heart racing. Without a word, she leaned in and kissed him, long and passionately. The world around them faded, and for a moment, nothing else mattered. As they finally broke the kiss, Nakia whispered,
I love you. I have always loved you, and I will always love you.
Kojo's eyes widened in disbelief, then softened with joy. He wrapped his arms around her tightly, pulling her close.
I waited so many years to hear those words again,
he said, his voice thick with emotion. They shared a lingering moment, savoring the depth of their feelings, the past washed away in the warmth of their embrace. With a smile, Kojo stood and offered his hand to Nakia, escorting her back to her parents' house. As they walked hand in hand, the bond between them felt stronger than ever, while back at the mansion, Liam and Anaya watched their mother and Kojo with smiles, knowing that love had finally found its way home. Days later, Kwame was called to the hospital. The hospital hallways were dimly lit as Kwame paced back and forth, his heart heavy with anxiety. After weeks of uncertainty, the doctors had finally found a kidney donor for his mother, but her health had been declining so rapidly that they had scheduled a rush surgery. Time was of the essence, and he needed all the support he could get. Kwame quickly dialed Nakia's number, his voice strained as he asked her to come to the hospital and pray with them before the surgery.
Please, Nakia. I know things are complicated, but I need you here. We need to pray for her.
Kwame said, barely containing his nerves.
I'm on my way.
Nakia responded softly. She knew how important this moment was, even with all the emotional scars that lingered between them and Kwame's mother. A short while later, Nakia arrived at the hospital, her steps purposeful as she made her way to Kwame's side. He turned to her immediately, relief evident in his eyes.
Where are the twins? I thought they would be here.
Kwame asked, glancing behind her, expecting to see Liam and Anaya.
They had a prior engagement.
Nakia explained gently, her voice calm but steady.
They couldn't make it.
Kwame nodded, though his disappointment was palpable. He'd wanted everyone to be here, united in prayer. Together, they walked into his mother's hospital room. The air was tense, machines beeping steadily as the medical staff prepared her for surgery. Kwame's mother lay frail in the hospital bed, her eyes closed, her skin pale. Family members gathered around, each wearing the weight of the moment on their faces. Nakia stood beside Kwame, her hand gently resting on his arm as the group formed a circle around the bed. Kwame glanced at his mother, the bitterness of the past momentarily dissolving in the face of her vulnerability. Nakia began to pray, her voice soothing yet powerful, a prayer of healing, strength, and faith for Kwame's mother. Everyone bowed their heads, echoing her words with their own silent prayers.
Lord, we ask for your mercy in this difficult time. We know that all healing comes from you. Please guide the hands of the surgeons, give them wisdom, and protect this mother as she goes through this surgery. Let your peace be with us, and may your will be done.
Nakia prayed, her voice filled with conviction. The room fell into silence, the only sound coming from the steady hum of the machines. Kwame squeezed Nakia's hand, grateful for her presence. In this moment, everything else seemed to fade away, resentment, history, and pain, and they were simply two people praying for the life of someone they both had ties to. As the medical team wheeled Kwame's mother out of the room toward surgery, there was a collective exhale, the weight of uncertainty hanging in the air. Kwame watched his mother disappear down the hallway, then turned back to Nakia, his eyes red but determined.
Thank you for being here.
He whispered, his voice raw. Nakia gave a small nod, her eyes filled with understanding.
We'll keep praying,
She replied softly, knowing that the waiting game had only just begun. After what felt like an eternity, Kwame's mother was wheeled back into her hospital room, the surgery finally behind her. The air in the room was thick with tension and relief as everyone waited for her to wake. Kwame, Nakia, and a handful of family members surrounded her bed, their faces reflecting exhaustion, concern, and a glimmer of hope. For an hour, she rested peacefully, her chest rising and falling steadily. It was the first moment of calm in what had been an intense and emotional day. The soft beeping of the machines was the only sound filling the room. Finally, with a small stir, her eyelids fluttered open. She blinked against the hospital lights, her vision blurry as she looked around, taking in the faces of the people gathered by her bedside. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes as she realized that everyone, people she had hurt, distanced, and manipulated over the years, was here, supporting her. Kwame was the first to move. He stood by her side, his face softening as he saw her awake.
How are you feeling, Mom?
He asked, his voice low and gentle. She blinked again, the shock of seeing them all there beginning to subside. She let out a soft, weak sigh.
I'm okay.
She whispered, her voice hoarse.
Sore, but I'm here.
Her eyes moved from Kwame to Nakia, then to the other family members in the room.
I can't believe you're all here after everything.
His mother's eyes welled with tears.
Thank you, she whispered,
her voice trembling.
I appreciate you all being here for me.
Kwame took a deep breath, composing himself before he spoke again.
The nurse went over some things we need to make sure you follow for the next few weeks. You need to rest, and they've given us a schedule for the medication. I'll make sure you stick to it,
he said, half joking to ease the tension. His mother gave a weak smile, and for the first time in a long while, there was warmth in her eyes.
I'll behave,
she promised softly. The family gathered closer, offering kind words, gentle touches, and the support she had never expected but now needed more than ever. Nakia stood quietly to the side, her presence a silent but strong pillar of peace. She caught Kwame's eye and gave him a reassuring nod, knowing that this moment, this fragile yet powerful moment of unity, was what they all needed to heal. They stayed by her side, making small talk, listening to the doctor's instructions, and offering their love in ways they hadn't been able to before. Kwame's mother, despite her pain and the long road to recovery ahead, felt an unfamiliar but welcome feeling blossoming in her chest. It was love, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel out of reach. It was there, surrounding her, as real as the people by her side. Nakia excused herself quietly from Kwame's mother's hospital room, offering a soft smile as she left. She had been gone for about 45 minutes when there was a knock at the door. Kwame, seated by his mother's bedside, looked up as Kojo and Liam entered the room. As soon as Kwame's mother saw Liam, her eyes widened in disbelief. The room fell silent as the realization of his presence washed over her. The weight of old memories and regrets hung in the air. Before anyone could say anything, Kojo held the door open wider. Nakia entered, pushing Anaya in a wheelchair, dressed in a hospital gown and attached to an IV pole. Kwame immediately shot up from his seat, panic rising in his chest.
What happened? Anaya, why are you in a wheelchair?
He asked, his voice filled with worry. But Nakia and Anaya only smiled, continuing to push the wheelchair toward the center of the room. Once Kojo, Liam, Nakia, and Anaya were all inside, Nakia turned to Kwame's mother, her smile still warm but firm.
Please meet your kidney donor,
she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The room fell into a stunned silence. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief, and an audible gasp could be heard from every corner of the room. Kwame's mother looked from Nakia to Anaya, her mouth open but no words coming out. Tears began to fill her eyes, her hands trembling as she stared at the young woman sitting before her. Kwame was speechless, completely taken aback by the revelation. His mother, overcome with emotion, could barely find the words.
Anaya,
she finally whispered, her voice breaking. Tears began to flow freely down her face.
I intended to do you harm when you were just a child. I was jealous, envious. My plans backfired, and instead of you, your brother suffered because of me. And now, here you are. You are the one saving my life.
Anaya remained quiet, her gaze steady on her grandmother. The room was thick with emotion as Kwame's mother struggled to speak.
I cannot believe this,
she continued, her voice trembling.
I don't deserve your kindness. I don't deserve this second chance. I tried to rid you from this world, and yet you're giving me the gift of life.
Nakia watched her daughter closely, her heart swelling with pride. Anaya, composed and strong, finally spoke.
My mother raised us well,
she said softly.
She taught us about compassion, even when it feels undeserved. Sometimes people who are cruel and inhumane may deserve every bit of the pain they've inflicted on others. But as children of God, we are not meant to repay cruelty with cruelty. We are meant to rise above.
Anaya paused, her eyes locking with her grandmother's.
Although you tried to get rid of me and failed, it doesn't mean you don't deserve compassion. I had to think long and hard about this decision, but in the end, I knew what the right thing to do was. And that's what I did. Not for you, not even for myself, but for the blessing, the covering, and the favor of my Lord Jesus Christ.
Kwame's mother's tears continued to fall, her hands covering her face as she broke down in sobs.
I'm sorry,
she whispered through her tears.
I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I swear to you, from now on, I will be the grandmother you deserve. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you, to all of you.
How come you didn't tell us that you were going to donate your kidney?
Kwame asked, his voice gentle but tinged with surprise.
Why keep it to yourselves?
Anaya looked at Kwame calmly before replying.
Because it was my choice,
she said simply.
It was my decision, and I wanted to decide when or if I would let anyone know. This was something I needed to come to terms with on my own.
Nakia nodded in agreement, stepping in to support her daughter.
Yes,
She added,
it was Anaya's choice, and I supported her in whatever decision she made. It wasn't for anyone else to influence. It was a deeply personal decision, and she needed to handle it in her own way.
Kwame, still at a loss for words, stood beside his mother, overwhelmed by the depth of the moment. His wife, standing nearby, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her own eyes wet with tears. Nakia, after allowing the moment to linger, gently placed her hands on Anaya's shoulders.
Anaya needs her rest now.
She said quietly. The room was still, everyone watching, as Nakia carefully wheeled Anaya out of the room. After Anaya left, Kwame found himself standing by the hospital window, staring out at the late afternoon sky, his thoughts swirling. He hadn't yet found the words to express the gratitude he felt for Anaya's sacrifice, but he knew he needed to speak with her. Anaya was sitting up in bed, a soft light from the setting sun pouring through the window, casting a gentle glow around her. When Kwame walked in, she smiled faintly, as if anticipating what he might say. Kwame stood at the edge of the bed, awkwardly shifting his weight before he spoke.
Anaya,
He began, his voice thick with emotion.
I don't even know where to start.
Anaya tilted her head slightly, her eyes gentle.
You don't have to say anything, Uncle Kwame. I did what I had to do.
Kwame shook his head.
No, I do have to say something. You did something so big, so selfless. You gave up part of yourself to save my mother, someone who hurt you, someone who didn't deserve your kindness.
There was a pause as Kwame's eyes filled with unshed tears. He took a step closer, his hands trembling slightly.
You could have easily turned your back, and no one would have blamed you. After all she did to you and Liam, but instead, you chose compassion. You chose to save her life, and I don't know how I'll ever be able to thank you for that.
Anaya looked up at him, her expression calm but sincere.
I didn't do it for her, Uncle Kwame.
She said softly.
I did it because it was the right thing to do, and I did it for my faith.
Kwame's breath caught in his throat, and he reached out to gently squeeze her hand.
Anaya, you saved my mother's life. You gave her a second chance, and you gave me more time with my mother. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Thank you, Anaya. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving her the gift of life.
Anaya smiled warmly at him, squeezing his hand in return.
You're an incredible person, Anaya. Truly. My mother may not have deserved your mercy, but I'm so thankful you gave it anyway.
Anaya nodded quietly, her strength radiating from the simple gesture. Kwame smiled, his heart full, and leaned down to gently kiss her forehead. As the weeks passed, both Anaya and her grandmother took the time they needed to heal and recover. Following their doctor's instructions, they gradually regained their strength, with the unwavering support of their family and friends. Their loved ones surrounded them with care, ensuring they felt nurtured and encouraged every step of the way. With each day, the bond between Anaya, her grandmother, and the rest of their family deepened, strengthened by the love, forgiveness, and appreciation that had blossomed during their time of healing. As a result of the newfound peace and healing in the family, Kwame decided to throw a grand white-themed party in celebration. It was his way of honoring the love, forgiveness, and second chances that had brought them all closer together. He planned a lavish event at the Duafora mansion, inviting everyone who had been a part of this journey. The party would be a symbol of unity and fresh beginnings, where everyone would wear white as a sign of purity and renewal. Kwame wanted it to be an unforgettable evening, filled with joy, laughter, and gratitude for the life they were all able to share. As the afternoon sun took its place in the sky, Nakia stood in front of the mirror at her parents' house, still in awe of the beautiful white embellished dress she had just received. She gently touched the fabric, tracing the intricate details. The note from Kwame's mother lay on the dresser beside her, and the words echoed in her mind.
I wanted to take a moment to thank you, Nakia. You've brought so much light into our family, and for that, we are forever grateful. Please wear this dress as a symbol of our appreciation and love. I hope to see you tonight, looking as radiant as ever. With love, Mrs. Duafora.
Kojo stood nearby, watching her with a soft smile, admiring how radiant she looked.
It's beautiful,
He said quietly.
but you make it even more stunning.
Nakia glanced at him, her heart swelling with gratitude for the love and support she'd received from her family and friends in the past few months. Anaya and Liam were both in the room too, helping their mother finish getting ready for the lavish white party at the Duafora mansion. The twins were already dressed in matching white outfits, excited for the evening.
Mom, you look amazing.
Anaya said, stepping back to admire her mother. She smiled with pride as she adjusted a few final details of Nakia's dress.
Yes, Mom, you look radiant.
Liam agreed with his sister.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Nakia replied, her voice soft. She then turned to Kojo, her eyes sparkling with emotion.
I can't believe Kwame's mum did this. It feels like the perfect ending to everything.
Kojo smiled, leaning in slightly.
Well, they sent 2 cars, one for Liam and me, and the other for you and Anaya.
He looked at her meaningfully.
Liam and I will head out first, and you'll follow after with Anaya.
Nakia nodded, a little surprised.
2 cars? That's extravagant.
Kojo chuckled.
Trust me, it'll be worth it.
A little while later, Kojo and Liam left, waving as they headed to the Duafora mansion. Nakia finished getting ready, with Anaya by her side, helping her with the final touches. As they stepped out to the waiting car, Nakia couldn't help but feel an odd sense of excitement, though she couldn't quite place why. When they arrived at the mansion, Nakia was immediately struck by how beautiful the entrance was. Cascading pink and white flowers decorated the driveway, and twinkling lights illuminated the path. Everything looked like a fairy tale. As they pulled up, Mrs. Duafora and Zara were waiting for her at the entrance, beaming with warmth.
Nakia, dear, you look stunning.
Mrs. Duafora said, taking her hand. Zara, dressed in white as well, smiled as she stepped forward with a bouquet of flowers in her hand.
I have something for you,
she said, handing Nakia the most exquisite bouquet of pink and purple flowers, with crystals and diamonds cascading from it. Nakia looked at the bouquet, puzzled.
What is this for? Why are you giving me flowers?
She asked, glancing between them. Zara smiled and said,
Every bride needs a beautiful bouquet.
Nakia's heart skipped a beat.
Bride?
She repeated, utterly confused.
I'm not a bride.
Zara and Anaya chuckled softly, knowing what was to come. Zara replied,
Yes, you are. Today is your wedding day.
Nakia blinked, her mouth falling open in disbelief. Before she could react, Zara gently nudged her toward the entrance of the mansion's garden. As Nakia stepped through, her breath caught in her throat. The garden was transformed into a breathtaking wedding scene. Guests were seated on either side of a long, beautiful aisle, lined with white petals and illuminated by soft lights. At the end of the aisle, under a gazebo adorned with cascading crystals and flowers, stood Kojo, dressed handsomely in a white suit, waiting for her. Nakia's heart pounded in her chest as she took in the scene. Mrs. Duafora smiled and said,
Come on, dear, let's get you married.
Zara handed a smaller bouquet to Anaya, who was overjoyed for her mother. Nakia felt tears welling up in her eyes, a mix of shock, joy, and love swelling in her chest. As Anaya made her way down the aisle, the bridal music began to play softly. Mrs. Duafora nudged Nakia forward, her voice filled with warmth.
It's your turn, my dear.
Nakia, still in awe, took a deep breath and began to walk down the aisle. Her gaze moved from the guests, who were smiling warmly at her, to her parents seated in the front row, their eyes filled with pride and love. She hadn't suspected any of this, and yet here she was, walking toward the man she had always loved. Kojo stood at the end of the aisle, his eyes never leaving hers. As she reached him, they stood together under the gazebo, hand in hand, gazing into each other's eyes with the deepest love and understanding. In that magical moment, the officiant spoke the words that would bind them as husband and wife. Nakia's heart soared as they exchanged vows, promises they had held close since their youth. As they were pronounced husband and wife, they sealed their union with a kiss, to the applause and cheers of everyone around them. The rest of the evening was filled with joy and celebration. Nakia and Kojo mingled with their guests, dancing, laughing, and reveling in the love that surrounded them. The night felt like a dream, a perfect fairy tale ending to a journey filled with trials, forgiveness, and love. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Nakia and Kojo knew they were beginning the life they had always dreamed of, hand in hand, surrounded by the people they loved most. Forgiving someone, even when they don't deserve it, isn't about excusing their actions. It's about freeing yourself from anger and hurt. Anaya's forgiveness toward her grandmother demonstrates the power of releasing bitterness for personal peace. Practice forgiveness as a way to lighten your emotional burden. It's not about forgetting, but about choosing to let go. I hoped you liked the finale of Forbidden Love. Please let me know your input in the comments. Also, don't forget to follow and share with your loved ones. See you with the next story.